Okay, guys, we'll get cracking because we seem to have nearly 50 people on the call now, and it's past 12 o'clock. So let's get started. I'll share my screen with you, and I will just guide you through what you will be expecting to hear today. So, of course, this is a webinar for business owners. So if you're a business owner out there, you might also be an accountant who I have invited from my accountant community. And we'll be going through what support are you entitled to. The government have announced a raft of measures to help business owners. And I'll be going through, just in summary, because we've probably heard the headlines from the government. So I'll go through in summary the support available. And then the vast majority of the session will be open to a question and answer. So to answer the questions that you have, the particular questions you have around what support is available, how you can claim. And we have a special guest with us here today. We have Zameer, who I'll bring on shortly, who is the MD of the Simplify Group, and he is an employment lawyer, HR specialist. So particularly for you guys out there who have employees, he'll be able to answer all your employee-related questions, everything to do with furlough, redundancy, and all the rest of it. So hopefully you'll get some value, you'll get some of your questions answered. If you're a client of ours, and if there isn't any question answered, you can always get in touch with us afterwards if we haven't been in touch with you already. So briefly, the agenda for today will be, as I said, in terms of after introductions, I will go through the support, and what I've done is to make it a bit clearer, is to break it down between the categories of business owners and individuals for which the support has been announced. And the way I see it is that there are businesses, first of all, there's all businesses, so there's some provisions which apply to all businesses, which I'll take you through. Then there are the business owners. So if you run a business and you have employees, then I'll go through the specific measures and support available for business owners with employees. Then we'll cover the business owner who doesn't have employees. So essentially, if you are a director of your own company and you are the only director, you are the only person employed, and you do contract work, for example, or you're a consultant, we'll go through the support available for director-only companies, and then touch on the support available for self-employed individuals. And after that, the question and answer session, which will be the vast majority of the time that we have together. So I expect it will last about an hour. I'll probably spend about 10-15 minutes on the headlines of the support available, and then we'll kick straight off into the question and answer, where I'll introduce and get Zameer on board to answer the employment-related questions you have. So housekeeping is just a couple of things in terms of your Zoom, using Zoom. I guess we're probably all experts at using Zoom now. You're probably all webinared out. I certainly am. I'm kind of zoomed out this week. And I don't mean away with fairies. I mean the number of Zoom calls and webinars I've had. This is my third webinar and probably my 8th Zoom video conversation this week. So glad it's the end of the week and have the weekend to let my larynx recover from all those webinars. Anyway, so there's really 2 buttons you need to use. One is the chat box. So any comments you have, put them in the chat box, which you'll see. Just note the drop down in the chat box. If you select all panelists and attendees, it's defaulted to just all panelists. So if you put a comment in there, just select all panelists and attendees, because otherwise only myself and Zameer will see your comment as opposed to anyone else. So if you want everyone else to see your comment, just select all panelists and attendees. And if you have specific questions, even as I'm talking, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and that will enable us to track which questions have come in and which ones we've answered. The danger of putting them in the chat box is that they do get lost amongst the chatter, whereas in the question and answer panel, it's much easier for us to track, and you can be much more likely that we'll answer your question. So hope that all makes sense. And there's a couple of questions already coming in from Nadeem. Is this being recorded? Yes, it is, Nadeem. And Gary says already, okay, he's asking a question from the off. Gary, we'll get onto that. If that question doesn't get answered in my brief intro, then we'll answer it when we hit the Q&A section. Right, so let's get cracking if that's all clear. So firstly, these these support provisions that you can see on the screen apply to all businesses trading as companies. So the first one they announced was the VAT deferral. So essentially, no business now has to pay any VAT until the next financial year. So until April 2021 or 31 March 2021, you don't have to pay any VAT. Now, I wouldn't trust HMRC systems. So if you do have a direct debit set up, our advice is to cancel your direct debit for VAT, which means that they can't take it. But otherwise, they're not expecting any VAT to be paid. It's also going to be interest-free, which is a bonus. So that just helps with a bit of short-term cash flow that no VAT is payable. Of course, if you have the cash and you have the reserves and you want to pay it, that's fine. But this is a way of just the government allowing a bit of a break in terms of the cash outflows, given that many businesses have had their incomes affected as a result of all of this. HMRC are open to time to pay arrangements. So the time to pay arrangements, if you haven't heard of those, are where they give companies and individuals time to pay, essentially where you can negotiate with HMRC to settle the tax liabilities that are owed and due over a period of time. So whether that be for your income tax, your payments on account, your POIE, your VAT, your corporation tax. Clearly now there is a cash shortage, and that's affected many businesses' cash flow. So the time to pay arrangements for HMRC have become much more flexible. So before you start to look at external funding, external banks, essentially HMRC is open for business as your banker. So use them first, because it's a much easier way to get credit and to smooth your cash flow by using HMRC as your lender before you go to any other financial institution for assistance. So of course the business interruption loan, so if the deferrals and the time to pay arrangements have not solved your cash flow issues, then you can also now go to the banks in the first instance to seek a business interruption loan. First port of call is to speak to your existing bank. Now they have been given a kick up the backside by the government to say they need to really get cracking and process these applications for businesses that have been affected to issue loans on an interest-free basis. They don't require a personal guarantee if the loan is less than 250,000, but beyond that, then they would. But remember, these loans are still going to be treated in the same way as other loans in terms of the process, the information you have to get together, and even the interest rates that they offer will depend, of course, on the risk and the collateral that the bank is offered or has available to them. And the last one was a business rates grant. Now this is automatic. So you may have heard that there are business grants available for businesses trading in retail, leisure, hospitality. So essentially those on the high street with the shop fronts. Those are automatic and will be processed by your local authority as of this month. So from 1st of April onwards, if you are entitled to them, that will be automatically issued to you. There's no application process you need to go through. They've been quite prompt on this. We had a client let us know yesterday that theirs had already come through. So it seems as if they're on the ball with this. And if you are due for one of those, then that should be coming through to you shortly. If you think you're entitled and it doesn't come through, then get in touch with your local authority. Okay, so next on we have, if you're a business owner with employees, then these are the headline provisions and support that's been made available to you. So you will have heard of the job retention scheme, which is essentially that the government will cover 80% of the wages that you pay out to your employees if you put them on furlough. A furlough is a word that's come into all of our dictionaries over the last couple of weeks, which none of us knew the definition of before, apart from employment lawyers like Zameer. It's essentially that if your staff cannot work, then you can put them on furlough. And the idea of this is that it's an alternative to redundancy. So the government didn't want businesses to lay off lots of people and make people unemployed. So they have come in with backing to say, keep your staff on, we will cover 80% of the wages. The employer can choose to pay the remaining 20% or not. That's entirely the employer's choice. It was then, there was a bit of confusion as to whether the 80% included the employer's NI and the pension, and it was later clarified by the Chancellor that that would be on top. So actually it's made a bit more generous, that it covers 80% of the gross wages plus national insurance, employers' national insurance, and pension. So actually it's a maximum of 2804 when you take into account the employer's NI and the auto-enrollment pension contributions that you are obliged to make as an employer. Just some conditions of this, which you've probably come across. So they must have been on the payroll as at the end of Feb. The process of claiming this has not gone live yet. It will go live in the middle of April, we're told, depending on how fast HMRC can get this together. So essentially, you've got to pay out the employees' wages as normal and put them on furlough, so give them the notices that they're on furlough, and then reclaim this 80% once the portal comes in. That will be taxable income. So given that you've already had tax relief on the salaries that you've paid out, any grant, this reclaim of the 80% will be subject to corporation tax in the normal way, like any other income. Again, this is a point which Zameer can talk about later. I'm sure there'll be questions on this in terms of the formal notice and agreement from the employee. It's a change of employee status, so it does require agreement from the employee for you to do this. Right, so this is if you're a business owner but don't have any employees and it's just you. It's just you as director or co-director, and you are unable to work because of the pandemic that we are faced with. So first of all, let me clarify, and this is a question we've had a lot, that people have said, oh, do I qualify for the self-employed grant even though they're a director of a limited company? So there is a big difference actually. If you're a director of a limited company, you are not self-employed. The self-employed definition here is if you are trading as a sole trader. So basically that means if you're trading in your own name with a self-assessment registration with HMRC. That's very different to being a director of your own limited company. As a director of a limited company, you are in the same boat as employees, essentially. So that said, you can furlough yourself, and this is where the gray area has come in terms of whether directors can actually be furloughed, because by definition, directors will always have duties to perform. So even if there are no active operational duties in talking to customers, in doing work, there are still statutory duties, fiduciary duties, which every director has to do, regardless of whether they have work or not. So for example, completing VAT returns, doing the admin, filing accounts, that sort of thing is considered statutory duties, and directors will always have to do that and be responsible for that. So when it first came in, there was no real guidance as to whether directors would qualify for furlough, because even if they had no work, they still had duties to do. So you could never say that a director has no work to do and therefore couldn't really be furloughed in terms of the employment law side of things. Then there was some additional guidance brought in from HMRC to suggest that actually if directors only had statutory work to perform and didn't have any other work, then they could be furloughed. So this is probably something that may hit the court sometime down the road, but for now, it seems as if it's a concession that has been made by HMRC, and they will essentially overlook the fact, in terms of the employment law side, that a director can still effectively carry on working, but only working to the extent of completing their statutory duties, their fiduciary duties, not actually doing any operational work, for example. Clearly, it's a grey area. Every situation needs to be seen on its own personal merit and circumstances. So feel free to talk to us or your client account manager here at the firm, and we can go through whether you can qualify or not, and what procedure to put through and in order to be able to claim this as and when it comes in. That said, the benefit to furloughing directors is probably not going to be massive, because most of you probably only take a small salary because that's the most tax efficient way to draw your income. So typically a director would take around about £720 a month, and the rest is dividends. Now, dividends unfortunately don't qualify. It's only the amounts that go through payroll, which means that 80% of a 720, not a massive amount, but something nevertheless. If you are genuinely unable to work and your business has come to a standstill, then for sure you should be able to qualify. No doubt you have July payments on account to make, so this is to do with your income tax payments that are due in July. You can defer these now until January and no interest will be charged thereon. So that's something else to help you out with your cash flow as directors. So now coming on to the last set, which is self-employed individuals. So self-employed individuals, I don't know if we have many on the call, but I'll just run through it very quickly. So this is if you are trading, if the majority of your income, i.e. more than 50%, comes from your self-employment. So if you do self-employment and have an income from employment, you can only claim this if your self-employed income has been greater than your employment income, so more than 50% over the last 3 tax years. And you have to have submitted a tax return for 18-19 in order to qualify for this. The maximum profit averaged over the last 3 years cannot exceed 50,000 for you to qualify. And this is kind of a cliff edge requirement. So if you had £50,001 of average profit, you wouldn't qualify. Unfair, I know, but that's how they've written the rules so far. I guess the good thing about this is if you can claim this £2,500 grant, it will be payable around mid-June in one lump sum. So you can claim a potentially £7,500 in June and carry on working. So it's not like the employees where you cannot work. It is something that you can claim and still carry on working if you are able to. And of course, you can defer your July payment on account as well, that's due in July, your self-assessment payment account. So only a couple of more things, and this is probably the last point that I will raise, and then we'll hit the Q&A section. So now more than ever, cash flow management is critical in your business. Cash is king, as they say, and even more so now where incomes have basically fallen over the cliff and just stopped. So it's critical that you monitor your cash reserves, plan ahead, prepare, use, and update your cash flow forecast regularly so you know how many months of cash you have left in the business before you really do start to be affected and run out of cash. Because when you run out of cash, that's not a good situation to be in, and therefore, and you need to know your cash position in order to be able to then plan ahead to decide whether or not you need to apply for the business interruption loan, or to seek an overdraft from your bank, or to utilize the deferment plans available from HMRC. We have prepared a cash flow forecast. So if you're a client of ours, we are offering this as a free add-on service now to all our clients. If we haven't spoken to you about it already, get in touch with your normal contact and we can help you with managing your cash requirements over the next few months, because this will be critical. The inflows in terms of the grants available, so the 80% will not be payable until probably later on this month or even going to next month. So you need to be on the ball in terms of even a weekly cash flow, depending on how sensitive your business is to cash. And therefore, it's important to model all your incomings and outgoings to know whether there'll be any months where you might be in a deficit and whether action is required. So really critical to do a cash flow forecast, monitor it, which enables you to then look ahead, forecast, project, and therefore make meaningful decisions on the survival of your business over the next few months ahead. Right, so that's enough from me. We can hit the Q&A now. We've already got quite a few questions coming in on the question and answer panel. Let me bring on Zameer now. So Gary from WSM, hey Gary, can any directors on the payroll be furloughed? I think you asked that before I went into the detail. So I think I answered that in terms of yes, but on the basis that you can't do any work, Gary. So I think you guys are still active and working and managing work and employees and all the rest of it. So only if your duties are limited to your statutory duties, then only can you be furloughed. Neil is asking, do you think there will be support forthcoming for directors? I sympathize with you, Neil, but I think we're all in the same boat here. We all extract our income in the same way in terms of small salary and then dividends. There have been some representations made by CBI and others in terms of trying to get the government to introduce similar provisions for directors of limited companies like they have for the self-employed. So the £2,500 grant that's been made available to the self-employed to offer that to director-owned companies as well. I wouldn't hold my breath, unfortunately. I don't think that they would be able to do that because it would be quite difficult to administer given that dividends are also, can be received from public companies and all the rest of it. So it would just be difficult to decipher, well, is it dividends from your own limited company or dividends from a listed company? It's quite messy to administer. So unless they come up with a way to do it sensibly, I'm afraid I don't think there will be any further support coming. Is bank holiday pay included in furlough? I'm going to let Zameer answer that one. Can you furlough an employee for 3 weeks, take them off furlough for a week, and then re-furlough them for another 3 weeks? If you had a member of staff that needed to run payroll, for example, I believe you can, but I'm going to let Zameer answer that one. Okay, so Zameer, can you see the Q&A?
I can, yes. Yep, I can see it. So
okay,
you want me to?
I'm going to, if you can see the Q&A, can you see the Q&A? Just give me a nod.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So I'll let you. I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'll let you tackle those employment-related questions.
Perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, first dealing with the bank holiday pay and whether that's included in furlough. At the moment, the advisory guidance is that any holiday pay, any annual leave, including bank holiday, should be paid at the 100%. So that
Zameer,
wouldn't be.
since we're frozen, can anyone else see Zameer? Can anyone hear Zameer? Just let us know in the. Oh, Zameer is back, I think.
Can you see me? Can you hear me? Great. Fantastic. So sorry, as I was saying, for any annual holiday, any bank holiday, the guidance at the moment is that, yes, this should be paid at 100%. And is not, you can't just rely on the 80% reimbursement from the HMRC. So hopefully that tackles that question, and that's quite pertinent with the Easter holidays upcoming and the May bank holidays as well. The second question, sorry guys, the second question is whether you can furlough an employee for 3 weeks, which is the minimum, take them off furlough and then re-furlough them for another 3 weeks. So as at now, yes, you can. There doesn't seem to be anything in the legislation that prevents that. However, we will know more as and when the HMRC portal is up and running as to what their conditions and criteria will be. But as at now, there doesn't seem to be any issue with that at all.
Thank you, Zameer. So I think the next one is, so we've answered that one from Anne. Gordon is saying the IOD are petitioning Treasury to have dividends included in the scheme. Brilliant. Yeah, they are too. Thanks for that, Gordon. Kalpesh Patel is asking, what if there was a loss in the tax year for self-employment? Do we use a negative figure to calculate the average or zero? Question, Kalpesh. I think zero, not too sure about that. So we'll have to look into the guidance and the detail for that one. Michelle says she can hear. Kali's asking, what if any help is available for property investors? Good question, Kali. And Unfortunately not. And this is something that we feel as badly as you do as landlords as well. And I think there is this wrong assumption out there that, basically there is an assumption that landlords have the broadest of shoulders, so they should stomach this as much as everyone else is. But um, yeah, it's been pretty tough for landlords in terms of the rents have pretty much disappeared, especially from commercial tenants who've been unable to pay. There's no support available for landlords in any of that. In fact, we've been told we can't evict any tenants for at least 3 months. So essentially, it's a case of um, bearing the brunt of it. And I guess the only thing that has been offered is the banks have been told to be a bit more lenient. So if you are feeling the pinch, then you can always talk to the bank about giving you mortgage repayment, capital repayment holidays, put everything, even the interest only. If you need to defer that for a while, then the banks should be receptive to doing that. But unfortunately, that's probably the only assistance available to landlords, unsurprisingly. Jared's asking, can we choose to top up some employees who are on furlough and not others? Zameer, over to you.
Perfect. So in theory, we can. There isn't, again, anything preventing that. However, one of the key things that we're currently advising clients and anyone we speak to is furlough has not precluded employment law. So we have to be very careful that there isn't a situation where we fall into the trap of discrimination inadvertently or favoritism, because that could come back and bite us as a tribunal claim later on. And keep in mind that we are expecting a massive spike in tribunal claims when we start to come out of this lockdown period, because people are going to be in a very difficult position. Jobs would have been lost, feelings of being hard done by. There would be a lot of movement towards trying to get any advantage possible. So what I would definitely advise, make sure you follow employment processes, make sure you take legal advice, because all of the employment law regulations will apply despite furlough being in place.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Zameer. So that one's answered. I hope that was okay, Jared. What else do we have? Anonymous attendee is asking, I have staff on SMP maternity pay, which is now ending this month. I have furloughed all the rest of the staff. So when can I furlough this person? Over to you again, Zameer.
Sure. So funnily enough, we're having a similar inquiry from a client at the moment going on live. It does seem that SMP will be a status of its own. Sorry, statutory maternity leave is a status of its own. So as soon as the employee returns, you can furlough at that point. It's not clear whether you can furlough whilst on maternity leave, but I would think that that wouldn't quite work. Also, you can do things in advance. So there's nothing to say you can't send out a consultation letter from this moment to furlough the employee at a future date. So it's worth sort of planning ahead.
Cool, thank you, Zameer. So that one's answered. This is a question from Doris, who works for us here. Probably not a question I can answer, so I'm going to pass that on to you, Zameer. There's also quite a few. So if you can see the Q&A panel, there's probably about 4 or 5 on furlough. So feel free to tackle them one by one, Zameer. Over to you.
Sure, just give me a moment because I have to leave this screen to go to the Q&A. So I'm just going to scroll down.
Okay, don't worry, Zameer. I'll ask you the questions. It's fine. Just deal with that one, and then okay. So what was the question? So Doris is asking, can furlough be reclaimed and then paid to staff if otherwise no cash available?
So could you give me some further clarification if possible? If you're saying, can we pay the staff on the furlough basis to 80% and then reclaim that back? Yes, we can. What do we need to do to achieve that step? We need to consult with the employees. We need to get their express consent. So furlough is not an automatic tool. That's another thing we must remember. It's a change of status for the employee, and it's a temporary status. So we must take their permission and their agreement. Otherwise, it would be a breach of contract. Keep in mind the legal basis of that is, as an employer, you are not obliged to give any work to an employee unless you're in specific exceptional categories. But you are obliged to pay the employee the contractual wage that you've agreed. So therefore, you do need to make sure you take their consent to go on furlough status.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zameer. The next one is, can a director increase his salary to be entitled to a larger grant, as during March it is common for year-end payroll adjustments to be made?
So yeah, very cheeky question. So I think, look, beyond being totally honest, there isn't a conclusive answer, but I think the guidance, and I can use a parallel of redundancies. So it seems that if one is looking at a redundancy, even despite an employee being on furlough, because there's a genuine business reason, that the HMRC guideline is to keep careful notes on why you have taken this step and what's the justification. So I would imagine it will be the same for that type of situation as well, where you're looking at wage increases. You can show a history if that's a yearly, annual decision that's been made, make a note and be ready to submit that to the HMRC. I can't see, as long as there's a genuine reason, why they would turn that down. But watch this space, because we're going to have to see what they come up with on the portal.
Cool, thanks for that, Zameer. Common question from directors. Kalpesh is asking, is the furlough salary based on the amount after salary sacrifice?
So that's a good question, and one I'm not 100% sure of. We have looked into the salary sacrifice side of things. I don't know if Reza, you can add anything on that front, but I'm happy to go away and come back with a conclusive answer for anyone participating today.
Cool, thank you, Zameer. Yeah, I guess it's based on the gross salary. So whatever that is before any amounts are taken off. But I guess we'll know more as and when the guidance is released.
Oh, sorry, Reza, I can't hear you.
Sorry, did I disappear there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Jared was asking, our furlough letter asked them to accept by 27th March, after which time their silence would be deemed to be their acceptance. Is this satisfactory?
I would be very careful with sort of deeming acceptance, because potentially you are looking at a breach of contract and also potentially a constructive unfair dismissal claim. So as per the guidance as at now, I don't think there is any deemed rules, so we must ensure we have categoric consent. However, it's how you shape the furlough letter and you shape or you pose the rhetoric. So you have to be transparent and honest with your employees that, look, if we don't furlough you, we will look at other measures which are a bit more permanent and a bit more disadvantageous for you, such as temporary layoffs, such as redundancies. So being totally clear and honest why you're going down the furlough route, I believe will get the employee on board, because they will see that we have to pull together in this situation, and the long-term ramifications for the business and for themselves just wouldn't be worth sort of messing about. So yeah, I think it's about setting the scene.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zameer. So this is a comeback question by Gary. There's 2 directors still working with skeleton staff for essential works, 2 directors not currently undertaking any duties. So for the, I guess, essential works still means working, but those directors not actually undertaking any duties will probably qualify for the furlough. Zameer, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I totally agree. That part is quite categoric at the moment. It is not undertaking any of the usual works, not advancing the economic benefits of the business or growing success of the business. So yes, anything beyond director statutory duties, I would certainly say would throw you outside of the scope of furlough. So be really careful.
Thanks for that, Zameer. Just on that, I mean, because there's the debate in the accountant circles as well, you know, in terms of this particular point. And I'm sure you've seen this in the Companies Act, one of the statutory duties of a director is to promote the success of the company. And that is quite far reaching, in terms of promoting success. But, in terms of how do you reconcile that with the fact that they can only do statutory duties? Does promoting success not mean they need to ensure that, for example, if there's no income, but they still need to liaise with customers about rebooking certain events? So we had a question from a wedding planner, I think, and she was asking whether she can still talk to customers about rearranging things, still talk to suppliers about making payments and all those things. Where do you stand with that, Zameer?
Sure. So I think this question falls out the remit of the legal side. So this is going to be a personal opinion. Just reading between the lines, you're quite right. It is a director's duty to promote success. What does that mean? In my mind, and keeping in mind that the HMRC are, contentious at the best of times, I would certainly say promoting PR marketing, I think it would be very harsh of them to come down and say that makes you fall out of furlough. However, anything sort of physically going in, sales meetings, closing, proposals, I think that's where you're really pushing the boundaries. As Reza said, how far-reaching are their investigations going to be? Well, again, the HMRC are not the most efficient at the best of times, but that's not legal advice. That's just one business owner to another. That's off
Brilliant.
the
Yeah,
record.
thanks for that, Zameer. Yeah, that could kind of go on forever, this conversation. So we'll get on to the next question, which is from Raquel. Can staff be furloughed if they could work, but employer chooses to stop them working?
Yes, absolutely. So there is no provision that dictates to you who can and can't be furloughed. So even if you feel that you want to take advantage of the furlough situation, again, we've been reasonably advised that there will be no justification process from the HMRC. So it seems you're totally clear. The only caveat to that is, as I said earlier, just be careful there's no less favorable treatment that could lead to a potential discrimination claim. But other than that, you're absolutely free to furlough who you want.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zameer. I see your father's come on and put a question in here saying, can I buy your cash flow template, please? If yes, please pass to my son, Zameer. I think Zameer deserves it for free for agreeing to come on here. So you're welcome. Kind. You're welcome to have it. I'll send it to Zameer. Don't worry.
Sorry, Reza, I've lost your voice again.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm back now. So Ghostwriting is asking, when could we expect the furlough grant cash to reach our accounts to assist with cash flow? I guess we don't really know the answer to this one yet. We've been told that the portal will be live mid-April. That's what they say, but then they said that they would get 10,000 tests a day by now, and they haven't. So it's civil servants, we're working in difficult circumstances. They've said mid-April. I think probably not until the end of April. So I wouldn't hold my breath if anything wasn't paid before the end of the month. So I think, manage your cash flow on the basis that it might not even come in by the end of the month, and see how you fare from that. Jason is asking, do you know if council tax is frozen or just business rates? We get charged this on empty units on our sites. I think the business rates questions, Jason, are kind of all dealt with by the local councils. They've said that the grants are all automatic. I don't believe there are any particular concessions for empty units. So if you qualified for the small business rate relief, then you get the £10,000 grant. But any business that is entitled to it, we've been told that the authorities have been writing to them separately and will process those grants. I think if you're in any doubt, best just to reach out to your local authority and ask them directly. Glenn's asking, the small business loan, is it available to cleaning companies? Glenn, I think you might be referring to the grant, which I was just referring to, which is linked to business rates and processed by the local council. So I guess you don't fit within retail, leisure, hospitality. So best just to give them a call just to see if you might, if you are in that small business rate relief, then that's open to all businesses, I think, pretty much on a shop front. So you might qualify for that if you're in that bracket already. Jared is asking, what is the thinking behind furloughed employees being prohibited from speaking to customers whilst on leave, as keeping in touch with them would mean that the company could bounce back quicker when this is over? Over to you, Zameer.
So yeah, I actually dispute that point. I don't think that's how far-reaching furlough would go. So I think anything in terms of keeping engaged and trying to keep the business afloat in terms of your client bank, I think that would actually be okay. Where you're going to have the problems is where we start trying to upsell, where we start trying to project manage in advance, where we're trying to sell services in advance. Then I think that's where the lines start getting crossed. But if it's literally just touching base, keeping in touch, there is the ability to volunteer for certain tasks. So the classic example I use is if you've got a manager in a retail store who is a key holder and an alarm contact, and the alarm goes off. If they go in to switch off the alarm, check everything's okay. Is that breach of furlough? I don't think so. It's going to be more if the manager gets in, switches off the alarm, puts up a marketing board and says, we're selling everything for 50% in the next hour. That's where you're going to have some problems. So I think keeping in touch, good communications is actually key right now. Totally agree with you. I don't think that will make you fall out of furlough.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Zameer. Good answer. Doris, again, is asking a question, which is, if basis of furlough is February payroll, will a pay rise from 1st of March be lost, i.e. 80% of Feb pay?
So in theory, yes, they wouldn't get the benefit of their 100%. But again, as long as we have justified reasons as to why the salary has gone up, and if that's obviously pushed them higher and closer to the cap of 2,500, then make clear notes as to why. It could be performance related. It could be, it's something that's been promised contractually. It could be coming out of probation. So just make clear justification notes as to why that has happened. I don't see any reason why that would be disallowed. But, we have to also make sure, and I can see why the HMRC would do this, that it doesn't come across as just trying to take advantage of the cap, because I think there you would fall foul.
Thank you, Zameer. Next question is from Raquel. I must say, Zameer, that last answer, I think a lot of this is to do with documentation, which is key, and it shows how important really the HR function is in ensuring that you're protecting yourselves and you're protecting yourself from any potential recall of any grants that you have claimed. So, working with an HR expert is critical at these points in time to ensure that documentation you have in place is fit for purpose and supports any applications for the grants that you submit. Raquel is asking, after VAT deferment on your opening list you had, please check, please clarify. Yeah, good spot, Raquel. Ignore that. That was my notes to whoever I asked to put the slides together, and they didn't delete it, so ignore that. It is end of the next financial year, but good spot. Deepak's asking, I had for a lot of contractors, some of them were looking for work but didn't get any work for say 6 months. Would it be okay to furlough them in light it may take them longer to find a role as they were on the payroll as at end of Feb?
So yeah, interesting question. So just giving some context, and please do re-clarify if I've got the wrong end of the stick. What you seem to be saying is we've got contractors who are on PAYE coming to the end at the end of Feb. They haven't been able to secure any roles. Can you continue their role? Again, it's all down to the justification. Why are you extending? If it's simply to take advantage of furlough, honestly, I'm not sure if that will or wouldn't qualify. It's a very gray area right now. If there is maybe potential that you see after the furlough period, you could re-engage them, then yes, I think that that's ground of justification. The other one that may not have been mentioned so far, but keep in mind, if you've been through the redundancy process and employees have been made redundant pre-end of February, one of the government conditions is that you can reinstate them if that means that it will avoid the redundancy going down the line. So if it's genuinely not going to avoid the redundancy, then don't reinstate. But if there is a possibility you only made them redundant because of the situation and now furlough will help keep them on, then that's absolutely fine as well.
Cool, thanks, Zameer. I think what Deepak meant that he looks after, he's an accountant, he looks after contractors who operate through their own limited company, and they probably haven't had a contract for the last 6 months, but as long as they have been processing a payroll for themselves every month and they've been on the payroll as at the end of Feb, then it's okay to continue to kind of furlough themselves from that month on the basis that they are unlikely to get any work in the interim. I think that's okay, but if you can confirm, Zameer.
Yeah, sorry if I misunderstood. Yeah, that sounds absolutely fine. That would fall very firmly into the regulations. That's absolutely no problem.
Cool, thank you. Right. Mohammed is asking, I have staff on 0-hour contracts. Can I furlough them? When will guidance be available for them? As we do have to decide now.
Yep, so furlough extends to all types of workers, part-time, 0 hours, full-time, of course. So what are the payments? You would either be looking at an average of what they earned a year ago, or if that's not available, it'll be working out an average of what they actually earn. But yes, they do qualify for furlough.
Cool, thank you, Zameer. So we've done that one. Glenn's asking, I have to pay my furloughed staff weekly from next Wednesday. Do I have to stand the cost until the mechanism to pay the company back is in place?
Yes, unfortunately, and as Reza alluded to in his presentation, cash flow is king in terms of making sure you manage it properly. You are still contractually obliged to pay everyone's salaries and everyone's payments as per their contract. So I wouldn't. It's not a case of like pulling the direct debit from the HMRC. We do still need to pay those employees, and the recourse will come back when it comes back. So just keep that in mind.
Cool, thank you, Zameer. If I go on payroll now, can I be furloughed? Because you have to apply for the furlough every 3 weeks. So for second round of applying, is it possible to be done so if on payroll after 28th of Feb?
So as at now, no. If you're not on the PAY and on the payroll at 28th Feb, you unfortunately don't qualify. And that's a heartbreaking situation we've had with a few clients who have new employees who genuinely started in March and haven't got any work to give them or have had to let them go effectively. So unfortunately not.
Thank you, Zameer. Comment from Mohammed Jafar saying option for HMO residential investors with vacant rooms properties is to contact their council as there is still a need for accommodation, maybe reduce rent, however, will be something. Thanks for that. So anyone else out there with HMOs, contact your council. There may be something on offer.
Sorry, Reza, lost your sound again.
Sorry, I went.
No, that's fine. No problem.
Furlough is agreed, but money can't be paid until reclaimed. I think that's more of a comment rather than a question. Claire Folks is asking, can you leave the furlough open-ended with no end date, or do you have to have an end date?
So at the moment, furlough being a very new concept within employment law and HR seems to be limited to the end of May, which is when the government have extended or have given their grants until. We will have to wait and see how that looks. So unfortunately, well, it's not going to be open-ended, but we're just going to have to take advisement when the government make a decision. It's anticipated towards the end of April, early May, they'll make a decision on where we stand with furlough and whether it will be extended or not.
Thank you, Zameer. Michelle is asking if businesses have more than one revenue stream, and for example, one stream of employees cannot work, can that group of employees be furloughed whilst the other group works? I think the answer to that question is yes. Do you agree, Zameer?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
So on an employee by employee basis. So if you deem that that particular role is not required and there's no work, then it's at your discretion to put them on furlough in the normal way. So I'll answer that one for you, Zameer. And Nadeem is asking, would answering your emails, communicating on Slack constitute working? So I'll give that one to you, Zameer.
Excellent. It's all the woolly stuff I'm going. But no, again, yeah, just going back to the point, I think in terms of internal communications, in terms of keeping good engagement within the business, answering the odd email, I don't see any problems as at now. However, if that starts translating into bringing business in and business development, that's going to bring income and growth, then you're really going back on that line. So I'd say any internal communications, engagement's fine, but just make sure it doesn't translate into profit-making work.
Thank you, Zameer. I think that's a good point, actually. If that's the your view in terms of the interpretation, the economic benefits, profit making, anything profit making is not allowed, but anything else kind of is. So that's kind of a good way of looking at it. So Parvi is asking, I own a wedding and event planning company. If I furlough myself, how do I continue to support our brides who are postponing their wedding until end of year, and also couples who are contacting us for next year? This would have a detrimental effect on our company for the following year as well as this year. So I guess from what you've said, Zameer, and you can come on in a second, is maybe supporting those ones who have already booked their wedding might be okay to rejig dates, but actually talking to couples to book weddings for upcoming events which haven't already been booked as at now would potentially constitute profit-making activities and therefore would not be allowed whilst you're on furlough. What are your thoughts, Amir?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't think the HMRC are going to require businesses not to speak to their ongoing clients, and especially in the event planning world, you've got to do that. We've got a couple of event planning companies, and we've had to do that. So that shouldn't be an issue at all. But exactly what Reza said, the minute that translates to new inquiries, bookings, proposals, I would say that's where the line gets crossed.
Thank you. Gary's asking, is there any guidance on annual leave entitlement once things get back to normal? Will staff still have their whole year's leave available? This could create a shortage of resources when we anticipate a large increase in workload. My understanding is yeah, whilst they're on furlough, they're still accruing holidays, etc., in the normal way. Is that right, Zameer?
Yeah, absolutely. So just always keep in mind they're still employed. Everything in terms of their contractual benefits, including holidays, will accrue. There's no stop there. So yeah, just make sure that you start thinking a bit further ahead. There will also be provisions allowing holiday to be carried forward onto the next year as well. So that hopefully will avoid a mass rush of holidays post furlough.
Thank you, Zameer. Got a question. I have heard cases of employers texting employees they are to be furloughed with immediate effect. Based on your previous comment, I assume that employer is in breach of employment law.
Yes, just a little bit. So yeah, as I've said, total consent is required because it is a change of status. So do refer them my way. I can guide them back.
Thank you. So just remind me, because I think you said that you need consent, ideally to get consent, written consent from the employee in writing. It just made me remember something actually that we got. A member of our staff's daughter works for quite a large company. I probably can't say the name, but they're a big employer in the area, a big theme park. Anyway, the employer wrote to them to say you are on furlough. Essentially, as long as we don't hear back from you to the contrary that you don't consent, then essentially you are giving consent. So I guess that is something that employers might be doing, But do you see, I guess your advice and recommendation for employers here would be that, belt and braces, get the employee's written signature so that, you're covered from any potential claims in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to make sure you're properly protected, that written audit trail is going to be vital. However, I can see the argument where you have particularly large organizations, maybe 100, 200, 500,000 employees, and how are you going to clock all those consents? So if you really have to go down that route, have a hard end date, and also do a follow-up letter. But my principal advice would be get concrete written consent from the employee, because that's just going to make life a lot easier later on.
Cool. Thank you, Zameer. Sam's asking, when is the next guidance expected from the government? No idea. We'll have to wait and see. Will HMRC be calculating the self-employed grant or the taxpayer? Well, that's going to be, they've already said it's going to be 80% of the earnings up to £2,500 maximum. So that will be automatically processed based on the submissions of the last 3 tax years, and we'll know more in due course. Saf's asking, why are landlords being seen to be treated unfairly compared to others? I think, like I said, there is this wrongful assumption that landlords have the broadest of shoulders, just the way it is, just how they've attacked landlords over the years with the legislation that's come into place. Easy target, I guess. That's a political move that government has taken. Due to the increase in minimum wages, most employees had been given increments in April, not just minimum wage, but beyond that. So can we continue with all the planned increments for all the furloughed staff? I believe yes, but Zameer, just want to confirm that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just reiterating the point made earlier, if there's a justification, absolutely go ahead. Just make clear written notes so that you can submit them if you're required to.
Cool, thank you. I'm conscious it's 1 o'clock. We've still got lots of questions, so clearly lots of questions. So Zameer, if you're okay to carry on and answer a few more, and we've still got kind of 50 plus people here, so I don't mind. We'll carry on and try and answer as many of your questions as possible. But clearly, if you have to go, no worries. Thank you for attending, and feel free to follow up with us if need be afterwards. Right, so banks may be seeking harsh personal guarantees for new loans. Is this the case? Well, I've read that under £250,000, they cannot ask for a personal guarantee. Beyond that, it's at their discretion. They probably will, depending on the collateral available, but that will be on a case-by-case.
Sorry, Reza, lost your sound again.
Oh, sorry, have I gone again?
Oh, cheers. Yeah, you're back.
Zameer, I mean, is there any concession on council tax? Asked by Nadeem. I don't believe so as yet. Sam's asking, my understanding is that furloughed employees can continue to work on personal development and studies for professional qualifications. Is this accurate? Yes, I believe so. Do you want to just confirm, Zameer?
So yes, that is correct. However, the one caveat to that is that will be considered as working time. And there is now an argument that they should be paid at least minimum wage for that time taken if it's personal development linking to work. So if it's general personal development for their own self, that's different. But if it's linking to work that's been set by the employer, there is a requirement to pay.
Cool. Thank you, Zameer, for that. Jared's asking, we have a few payments due from clients that are overdue. Some are considerably late and predate COVID-19, so it appears that they may now be using this to delay payment. How hard do you think it is acceptable to pursue them formally under the circumstances? I guess that's more of a business question, Jared. I would say if it's for work done, if it's a debt that is due, then it's perfectly within your rights to seek payment of that and use the necessary steps. Clearly, if the customer cannot pay for whatever reason and comes to you to request an extension, then that's up to you to consider. But if it's kind of from what I know of your business, if it's a large corporate who has the ability and the coffers to be able to pay, then I would use all means necessary to ensure that you get paid so you can continue to operate and conduct your business and manage your cash flow, Jared. How should furlough be handled if there is no employment contract? Is it okay just to send a letter and get agreement?
Yeah, absolutely. So where you say there's no contract, I assume you mean no written contract. There would be an implied contract of employment if they've been working. That would be on legal legislative minimums. But yes, absolutely, that's exactly the right way to do it. Send a letter out, get their consent, and you go forward.
Cool, thanks, Zameer. I think Deepak, that's just a comment from you, one-man band contractor companies, which I did clarify with Zameer. Glenn is asking, I have a 70-year-old who is self-isolated, over 70-year-old, as her partner, also over 70, is diabetic. Her work still has to be done and she's not sick. What is she entitled to?
Right. So if she's required to self-isolate, and there are certain categories, that can be up to 12 weeks. So technically, there's no SSP there because they're not themselves sick unless they're either showing signs or they're with someone who's showing signs. So what do? If there's a work from home arrangement that can be arranged, then that would be the best way forward. Otherwise, you're going to have to look at somehow progressing the work. I mean, furlough and layoff won't really work there because you do require them to do the work. Maybe you can make adjustments to the workplace. So an example we have is we have a group of pharmacies. There is a gentleman who's a high risk category. He works in the dispensing side of things. So what they've done is they've managed, because of the way the store is set out, they've managed to ensure that he has a two meter no contact zone where he can continue his work. So that's something else to look into. If you are going to require them to come in, make sure you take a proper risk assessment and seek some legal advice before putting anything in stone, because A, the legality behind it, if they got ill, there is that issue to deal with, but B, on an ethical basis, you don't want them to get ill and then go home and pass it to their partners or their family members. So that's the considerations to make.
Cool, thanks for that, Zameer. Jared's asking what support is there for permanent employees who left their employer after 28th Feb. I guess the safety net is universal credit, which is the only thing that would be open to them. If they're not employed, then they can't really be furloughed. So that answers that one. Jack's asking, hey Jack, in terms of collecting missed rent roll, are you looking to work with tenants for payment plans to catch back up, or are you expecting to write these off altogether? Do you realistically see the balances catching back up? Good question, Jack. I guess, yeah, what we're doing is at the moment not waiving anything, but offering payment plans and deferrals on a case-by-case basis. Particularly the commercial tenants have been pretty tough in terms of what they are trying to get, pretty much trying to waive any rents due, because some landlords may have done that, but then, some of the tenants, are probably in a stronger position than landlords. So again, they are required to make payments as per the lease, which ties them to that. So at the moment we are deferring and just monitoring the situation, and even if necessary, give them 12, 24 months to pay that, to give them that breathing space, because we appreciate that their trade has dried up and income has fallen off a cliff. Samantha's asking, we have layoff in our contracts. So if after a certain amount of weeks, furloughing employees and cash flow becomes low, are we able to swap to the layoff clause? Over to you, Zameer.
Yes. So if you've already furloughed employees, keep in mind it has to be a minimum of 3 weeks. So once you pass that period, yes, you could bring them back off furlough and then put them back onto layoff. Again, follow your contractual clause. If you've guaranteed to give a certain level of notice, make sure you do that. And keep in mind, for temporary layoff, it's either 4 consecutive weeks or 6 weeks out of a 13-week period. And there is a guaranteed payment to be made, which is at £30 a day for the first 5 days in any 3-month period. So those are the provisions just to keep in mind. Sorry, Reza, I lost your voice.
Thank you, Zameer.
Oh, there you are.
What if there is no money to pay furlough until the funds arrive from HMRC? So the question from Doris, I think you may have touched upon it, but I guess this is something that you can negotiate with your employees. But if you want to just confirm again, Zameer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in that situation, either it's communicating and negotiating and agreeing a way forward with your employees, or putting them on layoff. And then as soon as you can get to the furlough repayments, then looking to put them on furlough from that point onwards. Although it hasn't been clarified yet, so an interesting question has just come to mind. If you've laid someone off because of cash flow situation, and then you get to the point where you can reclaim furlough, can you do it that way? I don't think you can, because the government have been quite clear that furlough is not layoff. So we did anticipate furlough would be a type of layoff, but they have made very clear that it's two different statuses. So I don't think you can reclaim the furlough and offset it against the layoff. So you're going to have to talk to your employees and say to them, we won't be able to pay you, but as soon as we get the payments in, we will. And hopefully they should be able to agree and manage themselves as well.
Cool, thanks for that, Zameer. Nadeem was asking, doing a webinar to help our clients in terms of government assistance, would this constitute work? You're trying to help me out here, Nadeem, so I can put myself on furlough. Over to you, Zameer.
So Reza, I think you and I are furloughed then.
Definitely.
I think we're going to have to be really careful. Where does that seminar lead? If it's just providing free information, fair enough, but inadvertently you are promoting the business and you are encouraging inquiries to come in potentially. So be really careful where the line starts to get crossed.
Thanks for that. Nadeem, I don't think we've got a chance. Our workload has probably trebled and quadrupled in the last couple of weeks. So there's no way we can furlough ourselves with the amount of work we've got on at the moment. Okay, so Consul is asking, if a director on furlough answers the phone and is given work opportunity, what is the best course of action?
So I think without going into belts and braces with the person on the phone, it's a matter of just saying, look, we're closed for business at the moment. I will make a note of your inquiry. If it's okay, can we get back to you once we're back up and running? And I think you could even encourage them to send further details. But taking any next steps, I think that's where you're going to start falling out of furlough. However, the other suggestion is, subject to you reaching the 3 weeks, if that employee you're finding is getting a number of inquiries, it might be then worth changing the strategy, put them back off furlough, and let them work for the period they need to, and then go back again.
Cool, thank you, Zameer. Jared has gone. He was just, I think, checking the profit making. Those who are not on furlough are still able to generate profit for the business. Absolutely, they're your employees. They are required to do what is expected of them. Hinal is asking for interest-free loans to businesses from the bank. Up to 250,000 is unsecured. What would happen if a company liquidated, dissolved their company? If it does not pull through this crisis, if all the loan was utilized, would a director personally be liable for paying the loan if it was unsecured? Again, that would be a loan agreement agreed with the lender, depending on whether they've taken a guarantee or not. So that will be laid out in terms of what the lender has outlined in their loan agreement, and always best to take a solicitor's advice at that point, once the conditions and agreement comes through, to go through the small print that they have put on. Nadeem's asking, can you furlough someone if they are looking after someone else, like an elderly person, stroke kids?
Yes, absolutely, you could do. Again, we've had an example of that this week, where we have a care home who have a pregnant employee who's moved along in terms of her term, and it was the right thing to do to furlough that employee. In their situation, they didn't want to furlough everyone, because of course the care home has to continue operating, so they couldn't do across the board. But for, I think, particularly vulnerable employees who have any sort of health or status condition, I think that is the right thing to do.
Cool. Thank you, Zameer. Can furlough consent via text be valid as opposed to a letter, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Any written consent is absolutely fine. So just make sure you store that text or WhatsApp or whatever it might be somewhere safe, because if you do need to A, prove that there was consent, and B, prove to the HMRC, you have that written confirmation with you.
Thank you. And Nadeem is asking again, will the self-employed grant be paid directly to the self-employed person, or will we need to advise HMRC bank details? I don't think we know exactly how they're going to do that, but I presume people will log in under their government gateway, go into their personal tax account and make sure that their bank details are on there so that the payments can be processed into it in the same way as normal kind of income tax repayments are. So I presume that's the same way that they'll do it. Suzanne is asking, we have layoff in our contracts, so if after a certain amount of weeks furloughing employees and cash flow becomes low, are we able to swap to the layoff clause? I think you answered that. Yep, so that was already answered. Pari's asking, if we have invoices that need to be paid during the furlough period, i.e. already contractual agreements in place, are we able to invoice clients for payments due?
I wouldn't see why not, because that's just operational. So that's not particularly promoting the business and growth, etc. So yeah, I wouldn't see why not.
Cool. We're getting to the end. There's only about last question. And again from Nadeem. I think Nadeem, you win the prize for the most questions asked today. I would send you something in the post, but unfortunately we can't do that at the moment. So just sending you a high five virtually. So who will payments for furlough employees initially, employer and then passed to employees? I think those questions have kind of been answered in terms of, yeah, if you put people on furlough and you can pay them, you pay them, then you get the grants, which will be taxable. And if you can't, like Zameer said, you negotiate with them, have that dialogue to let them know as and when you'll be paying them, etc. One last questions has come in from Abbas. I assume the rules apply to charities too. The charity is an employer, is no different. So yes, all the same rules because they are employers as well. Excellent. I think that's it. Thank you very much, guys, for attending. There's been lots of questions today. So firstly, I'd like to thank Zameer for coming on because incredible value has been given by him. And thank you so much for taking your time out, Zameer. If people want to get in touch with you for additional advice and consultations on their specific affairs, what would you like them to do?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Reza, for having me along, and thank you for all the questions and all the participation. It's great to see that. Yeah, if you need to contact us, Reza, perhaps you can circulate my contact details. You can drop us an email. That's my direct email there, zameer@simplifyer.co.uk. If you go to simplifyer.co.uk, you've got our number as well. But just for those listening, it's 0203 011 0448. And yeah, feel free to get in touch. If you need some extra guidance, we can book a consultation. We can look at your specific circumstances, and I'm sure we can guide you along to make sure you get through this. But just a couple of quick points before you go. I know this is a very difficult time as an employer, very uncertain, very unsettled. But keep in mind three things. One, this is the absolute right time to get your HR in order. So your contracts, your policies, procedures. We have a bit of a slower period for some businesses. So if you've got anything out of place, now's the time to do it. Two, please keep up the engagement with your employees, whether they're furloughed or not, home working or on site. Make sure that you're keeping in touch because there's going to be a lot of well-being issues that come from this period of lockdown. And three, try and chart for the future. So yes, short term, we have to make sure we're protected, but look at that medium term later this year. Where do we want to be? And specifically from my angle, where do we want to be as in a people agenda? How do we want to come out stronger from this? So those are my 3 tips in terms of, helping you through on your HR side of things.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Zameer. Much appreciated. Thank you so much, guys, for coming along. Yeah, if you want to get in touch with us, you know how to. Stay safe, guys. I hope things work out for the best. And we're here if you need us. Have a great weekend. Catch up with you soon. Take care.